Welcome to There's No Crying in Fantasy. I am your host, Scrap. We are on right now. Let me bring my co-host in, Sean. Season 2 for There's No Crying in Fantasy. How's it going, Sean?
I'm going good, man. How's it going with you?
Going good, man. Just ready to get this season kicked off. It was a crazy week 1. I don't know how everything was going for you. How'd you do this week?
I won in 3 out of 4 leagues, so I'm 3-1. So I won in both of my dynasty leagues. I won in my work league, and then the only league I lost in was to AJ in the 3-man weave, and he just got lucky that Jaden Reed went off, and we're gonna talk about Jaden Reed later in the show.
Yep.
But we can take a deep dive into our teams. I don't know how many leagues you are in. I'm just in 4, 2 dynasty, 2 regular. I don't know how many you're in.
I'm in 6 this year. I've got 1 auction that's 14 team, 5 keeper league. I've got a couple of 3 keeper leagues. I've got 1 2 keeper league, and then 2 that are just regular redraft. So 4 and 6 this week. Did pretty well. Lost a couple of players due to injury. You know how that goes, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Already, week 1.
Yeah, already. It was a bloody week 1. It was a bloody week 1, but we're marching on. Hit the waiver wire last night, so I feel a little good about some of the acquisitions I made off the waiver wire. We'll talk about that in a second as well. So let's get into these overreactions. Who are we starting with?
Let's start with Jaden Reed, man. He went off on Friday night against your Philly Eagles, even though the Eagles got the dub in Brazil. He went off for, I think, over 30 points.
Yep.
In PPR. Hold on. Let me pull up his stats.
Reed had a great game.
He's actually wide receiver 1.
On the week.
So 37 points, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 138 yards, 1 touchdown, and he had 1 rushing attempt. That went for a 33-yard touchdown as well. So you're seeing a guy who can run the ball, catch the ball, and he's kind of like this gadget wide receiver. He was wide receiver 27 last year. I know Philly's secondary isn't all that great. Even judging off of last year, it's kind of looking like it's carrying over to this year. So I kind of just want to get this overreaction because that's how I feel like AJ beat me this week was with Jaden Reed. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, how did he know Jaden Reed was going to go off and be wide receiver 1? So, and a lot of people overreacting. I'm already seeing a couple trades for Jaden Reed.
Yeah.
So I just want to get your opinion on this. Do you think it's an overreaction, jumping the gun on Jaden Reed? Do you think he's going to be a top fantasy wide receiver this year?
I think he is.
Okay.
I think he is. I am sold on Jaden Reed. Philly's matchup was great for him, and Jordan Love going down actually hurts. But they use him, on jet sweeps. They use him in multiple factors. He can be effective on all 3 levels in the offense. So I think even with the loss of Jordan Love, Jaden Reed is still going to be effective. They're going to find ways to get him the ball and to make plays. You said he was wide receiver 24 last year?
26, 27, somewhere around there.
So you can see a jump into wide receiver 2 territory this year. And I think, like I said, they use him in kind of that Debo-like role where he's going to get the ball a lot and he's going to be effective. So I'm in on Jaden Reed. I think wide receiver 1 is a stretch. I wouldn't expect many wide receiver 1 fantasy weeks, but I can see a lot of wide receiver 2 fantasy weeks for Jaden Reed.
Well, if you go through his games this year, Philly's one of the top projected points he had. He was projected at 12.13 points against Philly, ended up with 37. Next week he plays against Indy with 11, projected to be 11.57. You know, Indy, Stephon Diggs went off fantasy wise. Nico Collins had a solid game.
Yep.
Tank Dell was, mediocre, which was to be expected. Uh, and I think Jordan Love kind of, it depends if he's going to play or not, and how long he's going to be out. I think Malik Willis is starting this week.
Yeah. That's where the kind of like you take a step back from Jaden Reed with Malik Willis. But like I said, they're still going to find ways to get him the ball.
I think Jaden Reed's going to be one of them guys that's going to go off for the first four, maybe almost to week 7. Um, the thing is, once Jordan Love gets back into action healthy, I just see too many interaction with Romeo Dubes or Dobbs. I can
Romeo
never
Dobbs. Yep.
Dobbs. I mean, so many people pronounce his last name different. Christian Watson, he's always off and on, but when he's on, he's on. So I just don't see it sustaining, and I think he's one of them. One hit wonders you'll see every year that'll go off for the first couple of weeks and then maybe he'll hit a wall. And I think he's in a tough division. Chicago looked great defensively week 1. Detroit didn't look that great. Minnesota looked good, but I know they played the Giants. And who else I'm missing in their division?
Detroit, Chicago, and Minnesota. And Minnesota's defense looked all right, but they were going against the Giants.
Yes. So we'll see what happens. I don't think he will be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, but I don't think top 15 is crazy. I think he could finish top 15. So,
Yeah,
I mean, compared to where he's been drafted at, I think that's a good value.
We got a couple of comments here from Hill. So he said he had a draft philosophy on specifically shying away from Packers wide receivers because I truly don't know which one will be the guy each week. That's a great point. I kind of took it with my draft philosophy. I thought Dubes was going to be the guy, or Romeo.
Yeah.
He had, I think, was 8 touchdowns last year, 60-something receptions. I thought he would be the one to take the step forward. With Jordan Love being out, with Jordan Love being out, I think Jaden Reed becomes more of the focal point in that offense because of the way that they can get him the ball. And then Hill says, I think Jaden Reed's value goes up with Malik Willis because of his Debo-like role and what he can do. And I agree. That's why I think Jaden Reed kind of maintains the success that he had in his offense with Malik Willis. You kind of have to move down Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson now with Malik Willis.
Yeah, you might see a lot more jet sweeps, a lot of motion action, but I don't think, even though Malik Willis has the arm strength, it's just the accuracy he struggles with, just his timing, and that's why he's a backup quarterback. If he can make plays on the ground, it just depends how much they give him the ball on the ground, but if anything, I think Josh Jacobs benefits from Malik Willis starting. I think you're going to see a lot of if Josh Jacobs is healthy, he is questionable.
Yep.
So, all right, let's move on to this next player who had let's read this comment. Tucker Kraft and Musgrave must be a target feast as safety blankets. They were last year. Tucker Kraft actually, in my opinion, outperformed Musgrave. So, and Jordan Love loves Tucker Kraft because he played majority of this season. Musgrave was hurt.
Musgrave was injured.
Yep. So, and he is right. They do still targets in that offense. They like to use the tight ends, 2 tight ends a lot. So Let's move to the second player. He had a big time week 1 stepping in for CMC against the New York Jets on Monday Night Football. Jordan Mason. He's been getting huge hype, especially since Christian McCaffrey might be out for the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
So what's your opinion on him? He had 147 yards rushing. He was running back 5. Yeah, he was running back 5.
Yep.
With 22 points. So 28 attempts, 147 yards rushing. So I wanted to get your opinion on Jordan Mason because I had an argument with one of my coworkers. He's in my work league. He was bragging about how he picked him up before week 1. He's like, I knew he was going to go off, blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Elijah Mitchell kind of benefited in the past when Christian McCaffrey went out. But the thing is, I don't think Jordan Mason is as good as Elijah Mitchell when Elijah Mitchell is fully healthy. And I don't think it's going to last. Just like Jaden Reed, even though I think Jaden Reed is the better player out of the two, I just don't see Jordan Mason's fantasy success lasting like he did in week 1. Just because he's a backup running back. That was his first career start. He was an undrafted player. You got to remember the 49ers drafted 2 different running backs in the draft. One of them they ended up cutting, Cody Strader. They still got Isaac Guerrero, who's hurt. But in my opinion, if you see him healthy back on the field, just like Elijah Mitchell, they immediately take Jordan Mason's field snap count away. So I just don't see him sustaining in the next couple of weeks, and he's a very short-term option for you to start in your fantasy lineups.
I think we have to look at the overreaction in context. If you're looking for a plug-and-play running back, I think Jordan Mason is a great play for this week. I think any running back in that San Francisco offense is going to do work. So if I have Jordan Mason, if I was able to get him off the wire, I have him in one league where I picked him up before week 1 because I know that backup role to CMC is valuable. I think it's not an overreaction that he can go out and do that again. I think if you're thinking about long term or for a season long, no, I don't see them. Kyle Shanahan likes to use one back. You rarely ever see the second back get more than maybe 5 fantasy points in a single game, outside of like CMC. So whoever has that lead back role is going to be valuable. And I think that is going to be Jordan Mason. He's shown that he's trustworthy, and they obviously are going to go to him when CMC is out. So I think, yes, this is a good plug and play. Even if CMC does come back, I'm still holding on to Jordan Mason. So I don't think it's an overreaction.
And let's play pretend here, and let's say CMC misses half the season. I do feel like the 49ers, they play a tough run defensive schedule. And I know Kyle Shanahan likes to use his running backs in a very variety of ways, but you go at Minnesota, at Los Angeles Rams, and then you play New England, Arizona. You could probably go off on at Seattle. It's just the schedule keeps getting tougher and tougher for the 49ers, and the 49ers are a great team, like they always been in the past few years. But I just don't, like you just said, he's a plug and play guy right now until CMC gets back. And even this short-term plug and play, I just don't think he's going to replicate like he did week 1. I think his average ceiling should be around 10 to 12 points per game, in my opinion.
Well,
PPR leagues.
Let's look at the Jets defense. The Jets defense coming into the season, everybody thought was a top 5 defense.
Sure.
Especially with their front 7. Like, They went and put up what? How many? He had what? 147 yards on the ground against the Jets defense. Why
28 attempts.
why do we think that he can't replicate that again? I mean,
I
that
think it's a fluke. That's what I think it
that
is.
offense is set up on the run. They drive off of the run. Like their pass game, everything works through the run. So they're not going to put the ball in Brock Purdy's hands for 35, 40 attempts per game. It's going to go through the run. So I think that he's going to be utilized. I don't think you want somebody that's going to get the ball, that's going to get attempts. And I think this is the person in that offense that's going to get it. So I don't think it's an overreaction going in at least to week 2. And I know that they have a tough matchup coming up against, I believe it's Minnesota. Um, they can still replicate this success with that offensive line and the way that they're set up, the zone run scheme with Kyle Shanahan. I say roll them out there.
I think you got to start him for sure. It's just, it was week 1. I know the Jets defense was projected to be a pretty good defense. Their offense wasn't producing like we thought they were with Aaron Rodgers back in the fold. So that defense was on the field much longer than they should have been. And I just feel like defenses are just going to get smarter against the 49ers, especially if Christian McCaffrey is not going to be playing. And they're going to get to the point where they're going to be defending the run, and they're going to force it on Brock Purdy, to pass the ball and win them the game. Because at the end of the day, your best 2 players offensively is Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, and they had very quiet games against a very good passing defense. Deebo Samuel didn't really have a quiet game, but Brandon Ayuk had a quiet game. So the Jets have a very good passing defense. I just feel like, as the season progresses, they're going to force Brock Purdy to pass the ball because they're not going to be able to rely on the run because Jordan Mason, although seems like he's a reliable backup back and he can plug and play, he's not Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey can go up against a full box and still make these plays that nobody can in the league. Jordan Mason is not Christian McCaffrey. So when they start stacking the box, when teams start to game plan for Jordan Mason, I just don't think he's going to produce.
Okay. We'll see next week. I think that they can still replicate that success.
We'll see. We'll see. And let's go ahead and go to this next player, Caleb Williams. He had a dud of a game, even though he was celebrating to win. He was probably one of the worst rookie openers
Thanks to the defense.
from a first overall pick I've ever seen. And they won the game, and he didn't seem like he cared to play super bad. But I guess the win's a win. What's your outlook for Caleb Williams for the rest of the year? And do you think it's an overreaction that he's a bust?
This is not an overreaction to me.
Oh, okay.
I've never been high on Caleb Williams. I think the speed of NFL defenses got to him. He faced a tough defense last week. I think he's going to face another tough defense this week with Houston. It's going to get harder for him. And I believe in the division that they're playing in, like you said. You have Green Bay, you have Minnesota, and then you have Detroit, which all have probably middle-of-the-road defenses. Detroit has gotten a little bit better. It's not going to get easier for him this season. You lose Roma Dunze, well, maybe. Keenan Allen is banged up. All you have is DJ Moore. One thing that I didn't see him do that I see a lot of rookie quarterbacks do is use the tight end. He didn't use the tight end. To me, he has a top 10 tight end in Cole Kmet. I didn't see them get Cole Kmet involved last week. The run game was subpar. So I don't think this is an overreaction for Caleb.
Well, I think it is an overreaction because I damn near drafted Caleb Williams in 3 out of the 4 leagues I am. And I also drafted Jaden Daniels. That was my draft strategy this year, was to draft 2 rookie quarterbacks, 2 of the 2 top rookie quarterbacks. I started Jaden, didn't start Caleb. So, which that worked out for me because Jaden got 28 points, even though in real life he didn't do all that great. But Caleb Williams, I think he's going to have a coming out party against Houston. You see Anthony Richardson, who missed majority of the season last year, will absolutely go off against Houston. I think it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be one of them games. Even though Chicago's defense looked very good and elite, I still think it's going to be a shootout because there's no way you're going to be able to stop C.J. Stroud and his weapons. I think it's a very two similar teams as far as the weapons they have. The Bears are just a tad bit younger, maybe a year off as far as offensive. Um, I am disappointed in Keenan Allen. Um, all training camp, I feel like there's been some problems there. Him gaining weight. He seems like he's not taking it serious in Chicago. So, I mean, that does hurt Caleb Williams in a way. But I still feel like Caleb Williams will figure it out. I do think he's going to eventually use. He's going to have to use the tight end Cole Kmet because you need a safety valve. Um, so I like Caleb Williams for the rest of the year, and that's why I drafted him. I just don't see him being a bust. I just think they surrounded him with too many offensive weapons for him to be a bust. Um, he was sacked twice. Offensive line's a little wishy-washy. He did have 5 carries for 15 yards. That's probably scramble yards. He's not really a designed runner. But, you know, maybe if he doesn't fumble the ball, be a little bit more safer, do your security blankets like your tight ends, dump it off to the running backs when you don't see anybody open. And I think you're going to see a guy who might finish top 15, top 10 at the end of the year. That's who I have Jaden finishing. I have Jaden finishing in the top 5 of quarterbacks this year in fantasy.
I see. I'm all in on Jaden Daniels, but I'm all in on Jaden Daniels because he is. They are scheming him up to use his legs. Caleb
Correct.
Williams. Caleb Williams. They are not scheming him up to use his legs. Like you said, it's all scrambled. And that to me, for a rookie quarterback, I think that is the success or the way to success to being a top 10 quarterback is by using your legs. Um, I think if he is trying to force the ball, if he is trying to, um, get his receivers involved, it's gonna be hard for him. And going against a defense like Houston, I know that you think he's going to go off against Houston. Houston has a good defense. They may not have shown it last week, and they went against a tough opponent last week in Indy. Let's not compare Caleb Williams to Anthony Richardson. They're not the same quarterback. Anthony Richardson has the potential to be a top 5, top 3 quarterback this season. I don't think Caleb Williams is able to do that. And part of the reason is he doesn't use his legs.
And I do agree with that. Absolutely. That's why I said top 15, maybe top 15, top 10 if he's lucky. Houston does have a good defense. I just think if you compare Caleb Williams to what Bryce Young went through last year, I just think Caleb Williams has more of an opportunity to be set up for success. And the Bears do have a lot of pressure to perform because they got all these weapons. Not to mention their coach is on the hot seat. So it's playoffs or bust for the Bears, and I'm banking the Bears to make the playoffs. I'm mostly banking on Caleb Williams to perform because there's a reason why he's the first overall pick. I've scouted him through his film at time as a USC. I do think Jaden Daniels is better because he's a true dual threat quarterback, and I've never seen a quarterback that can do uh, passing and running the ball just as good equally. Caleb Williams, he's more of a passer, but he's gonna figure it out, man. I just you got DJ Moore, you got Keenan Allen. I know Keenan Allen, looked bad there in camp, but still, he's a veteran. He's gonna figure it out. Is Roma Duze hurt? Is that the news?
That's what I'm hearing, and he's not going on IR, but it's week to week right now with I think it's a knee sprain. So he could be without Rome. Keenan Allen, I believe, is injured. I don't know if he's going to play this week. So you're left with DJ Moore and Cole Kmet.
As long as you got DJ Moore, at least if you got one healthy wide receiver out of those three, I think you're fine. I think that's more than what Bryce Young had. The Bryce Young, you look at his wide receivers; their wide receivers still suck. I mean, it's just
No,
the
Bryce Young sucks. It's not the receivers. It's Bryce Young.
hey, I'm still standing on my Bryce Young take. I still think he's
Stand,
going to finish
stand
top
on
15
business.
this year.
Stand on business. I understand, but Bryce Young sucks.
You got to realize he played against my Saints, who have elite defense, and they're coming for everybody this year.
I
So
said that. I said the Superdome is the hardest place to play in. I understand why he stunk, but Bryce Young has been like that all last season, and this wasn't a good start at all.
we'll see. We'll see. Um, do you have anything else to say about Caleb Williams?
Nothing else to say about Caleb.
All right, let's move on to the next player, J.K. Dobbins, a guy that always gets overhyped every year before the season starts just to get injured for the entire season. So, which game are we going to see where we get that ESPN notification that J.K. Dobbins is out for the year for a torn ACL? I don't know. But, he's showing his potential that he could have had in Baltimore if it wasn't for the injuries. Um, it seems like he is the lead back. He's only 25 years old, which is younger than Gus Edwards, who's also a former teammate in Baltimore of J.K. Dobbins. 10 rushes, 135 yards, and a tud against the Raiders. They play at Carolina. Could be a good start, considering that Kamara and Jamal Williams did a very good job rushing the ball against Carolina. Nothing crazy, but they were effective. Um, what do you think about J.K. Dobbins? Do you think this is an overreaction, or we're finally seeing a J.K. Dobbins we thought we would if it wasn't for the injuries?
Overreaction.
Okay.
This is definitely a overreaction. 10 rushes. It was pretty much a split backfield until maybe about the third quarter or so when JK got hot. So I think you're going to see this offense ride the hot hand. There's going to be weeks where Gus Edwards is going to get involved. You mentioned the injury risk with JK. I think this matchup against Las Vegas last week, where he got 29 points, this is kind of a one-off. You may see him get 10 points. You may see him get 8 points some weeks, 11 points. I don't see him replicating that 29 points. Now, he does have a favorable matchup going against Carolina. I do expect for them to be up and running the ball in the second half. But I think once they get up, that's where you're going to see Gus Edwards go to work. Um, the thing about JK is that he's more of a dynamic back.
True.
And he's not the guy that they're probably going to use on the goal line. That's going to be Gus Edwards. So you're going to see Gus take away a lot of the touchdown opportunities. I think the touchdown that he had against Vegas was like one of those long runs that he pulled off. So I just think that, yes, he can be a solid piece for your team week to week, but don't expect 29 points. Don't expect 20-plus points. This is going to be a split backfield where they're going to ride the hot hand.
And I'm trying to think of the offensive coordinator because he's the same offensive coordinator that Baltimore had before Todd, Greg Roman. That's his name.
Yep.
So he's obviously, and that's why you got Gus Edwards. That's why you got J.K. Dobbins, because they're very familiar with Greg Roman. You're absolutely right. I think it is an overreaction. Gus Edwards will get that goal line work just like he did in Baltimore, and that's why you have Gus Edwards on your fantasy squad, is for those goal line carries. You're not necessarily caring about the attempts he has. You're just worried about the red zone and the goal line. Obviously, Gus Edwards isn't a guy you will be starting every week. He's a guy you start if somebody's on bye or you have nobody else to start. He's a good option just because he gets those goal line carries, and that's what he's valuable for. Um, if you look at this Chargers backfield, it's very it's very hard to look at. It's worth to note maybe people should start stashing the rookie
Kamani
Kamani
Vidal.
Fadal. He
Yep.
was inactive for week one, but I don't remember what round they drafted, but he had a decent camp. It's worth noting to stash him in deeper leagues just because you already know J.K. Dobbins is very wishy washy with his health. Gus Edwards isn't a full time bell cow running back. He's only good for short yardage goal line carries. So, or you can go with Jared Patterson. But I think Fadal has more of the upside, and he's definitely a stash guy.
Yep, I agree. In deeper leagues, I think Kamani Vidal.
Deeper
Yeah,
leagues, yeah.
he's a good stash.
Um, let's move on to the next player, Jameson Williams for Detroit. He's finally putting up the numbers we thought he would coming out of Ohio State, Ohio State. He was suspended for half the year last year, wasn't he?
Yes,
Suspended?
for 6 games.
Yep. So let's see. He was wide receiver 4. So he was wide receiver 4 with 28 points. And, it makes sense. And I don't think this is an overreaction. I think, Jaden Reed, how you view Jaden Reed is how I feel about Jameson Williams. If he's healthy, um, so he's questionable already, but you got to think about it. He had 9 targets, caught 5 of them, 9 targets, but for 121 yards for 1 touchdown, obviously he's a deep threat guy. And Jared Goff is been great in Detroit. I don't think his momentum is going to stop anytime soon. So, you know, somebody has to be wide receiver 2 for Detroit. Sam Laporta, tight end, sure, but outside of St. Brown, you need a wide receiver 2. Williams absolutely did his thing week one. And I think, how Jaden Waddle kind of had a went off uh, during his time in Miami, not last year, but the year before. I think you might see a similar season with Williams. Maybe not as good, but I think it might be great value because people drafted Jameson Williams pretty low.
This is not an overreaction for me as well. Um, if he can stay healthy, but the way that they talked about Jameson Williams, one, since they drafted him, and two, all throughout the offseason and training camp, they want to get him the ball. So I see this success that he had kind of sustaining throughout the season. And if I'm an Amon-Ra St. Brown owner right now, I'm a little worried because the chemistry that was shown with Jameson Williams and Jared Goff throughout that game was really good and kind of promising for the future of the season. The Rams don't have a great defense. It's not like they were doing anything to really take away Amon-Ra St. Brown. They weren't really doing anything to take away Sam Laporta. It's just the connection between Jameson Williams and his ability to get open and create separation was phenomenal, that Jared Goff could get him the ball in stride and get, chunk yardage. So I think that this is a connection that can last throughout the season, and definitely not an overreaction. He's a guy that I'm putting in my lineup every week as long as he's healthy, and I think he's gonna do well. I think that this could be a potential top 15 wide receiver in this offense for the remainder of the year.
I 100% agree, and I think he's definitely a trade candidate. You definitely, you know, he might be a little too high to trade for. Well, let's say he has one bad week. I guarantee you could probably get him on the cheap, and then he'll perform like he was the following week. He's not going to be consistent. We all know that, but when he's on it, he's going to be on it, and you're going to want him to be in your starting lineup.
Yep.
So either in your flex or your wide receiver 2 slot. So definitely think about trading for him. Maybe wait it out a week or two, see if he has a quiet game. And when he does have a quiet game, I think that's when you start sending your trade offers, see if you can get him on the cheap. Because nobody's going to sell him right now for having that week 1 performance because they're thinking what we're thinking.
Yep.
But considering his background, go ahead.
9 targets as well. That's not
9 targets.
really wide receiver 2 territory. He had 9 targets in that offense, and that means that Jared Goff is definitely looking for him. This is not just somebody that he's going through his progressions to try to get him the ball. This is somebody he was targeting, coming out the gate. I think you're going to see more of that throughout the season.
Yeah, he led the team in targets. Gibbs and St. Brown was tied for second at 6. So he had 3 more targets than those two,
Yep.
Which is crazy. So that should be a green flag for you, and it's not an overreaction. I totally agree. But this next player, and these next 2 players, I don't know if you want to combine these 2 right here. They play for the same team, the same position, and that's Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. A lot of people were mad about this situation. I am an owner of Mark Andrews in one of my league. I got him kind of in the, I think, 6th or 7th round, which is kind of low for Mark Andrews, but considering he was hurt a little bit last year, it makes sense. Do you think this is finally the down year for Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely taking his spot? Do you think that's an overreaction?
I don't think it's an overreaction. I think Mark Andrews is on the decline, but I do expect better games from him. But I think Isaiah Likely is going to take a step up from what he did last year and kind of take that number 1 tight end role in this offense. One thing that I liked is that they're splitting him out wide. He's not just lining up in the tight end spot, but he can line up and block, which means he's going to be on the field. I think they're going to use more 2 tight end sets. As you know, Baltimore does not use wide receivers like that. Other than Zay Flowers, I don't see a lot of wide receivers in that offense getting touches. So I think you're going to see Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews be involved. But I think Isaiah Likely is the tight end that you want to own in this offense because of his ability to be almost like a wide receiver in the way that they utilize him.
So he actually led the NFL last week in targets with 12 targets, which is crazy. I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle right here because I just know that maybe Mark Andrews is still kind of banged up and they're just taking it slow and letting Isaiah Likely fill that void. I think there's going to come a point of time where they're going to start using both as weapons, and they're probably going to share that target share as the season progresses. I just think if Isaiah Likely was a tight end 1, a true tight end 1, it's definitely not an overreaction for sure because the talent is there. And Andrews is on the downside of his peak, but I think it's a little too early to say that, he's done with. I think, you see Travis Kelce still performing at his age. And I just feel like Mark Andrews is still on the same boat. I think he's still going to produce. And I just don't think Isaiah Likely is just going to get the chance to shine like he can because Mark Andrews is still there. So
I have a question
I'm kind
for
of
you.
in between.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you expect Mark Andrews to stay healthy for the whole season?
That's a hard question. I'm gonna say yes because it definitely seems like they're taking it slow with him. I mean, let me look up his snap percentage.
Since they're taking it slow with him, and he's obviously not being targeted, at least not for week 1. is he a guy that you want to keep in your lineup week to week? For me, that's a obvious no. I don't want to keep him in my lineup.
Maybe just not for the first 2 or 3 weeks. You got to play it out. There's always other guys you could probably start ahead of Andrews until you start to see Andrews actually in action. He only had 2 targets. There's something clearly wrong with Andrews. Um, I just, like I said, once he gets healthy, I just feel like he's just going to take his role back unless Isaiah Likely becomes more of a, wideout, So
I,
um,
I,
I just when Andrews is healthy, they're just not gonna play Likely over Andrews.
I'll tell you, I believe in Leslie so much that he was my first pickup off the waiver wire. I had the first waiver priority spot, and I picked him up first because he was out there. And I feel like if you need a tight end, I don't think Isaiah Likely is still out there today, but if you need a tight end, I'm putting Isaiah Likely in because I don't think that what he did in week 1 was a fluke. I think we saw it throughout last season and it was building. And even when Andrews came back, Likely was still involved. So I think that this trend continues and it's just going to pick up throughout the year where he's going to be the tight end 1 in that offense.
I think when he plays, if he's playing tight end 1, I think you're right. He's gonna produce. He's ready to take that next level. It's just is the Ravens going to give him that chance, even if Mark Andrews is healthy? I don't think so because Mark Andrews has steadily proved that he's one of the top tight ends year to year, and they're just not going to play likely over Andrews once Andrews is fully healthy. I just don't see it.
Yeah.
Your best chance is if Andrews continues to be hurt and he doesn't play. Absolutely, start Likely. He might be one of the top tight ends in the league if he's starting playing majority of the snaps at the tight end position for sure. Somebody spent $70 of their fab on Likely in my dynasty league. I can't believe nobody had him on their roster. But we only hold $100 of fab for the entire year. Somebody spent 70 on them.
I have a league where the budget is 1,500. Somebody put 1,400 down on Likely.
Jeez, man.
That's how much people believe in Likely right now. And I think it's just the offense and the way that the offense is constructed and the way that they use the tight end. People believe that Isaiah Likely is going to have a breakout year. And if it's a keeper league, you've probably got a guy that can put up wide receiver numbers and be a keeper going forward in your tight end spot. So I don't see anything wrong with it. Not an overreaction.
For sure.
Let's get into starts and sits.
Yep. All right. So you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm gonna do start and sit for quarterback, and then you can do your start and sit, and then we'll go running back, wide receiver, tight end. For me, my start of the week, I think this is a smash spot. It's Jaden Daniels going against the Giants. I mean, I started Jaden Daniels last week. I thought it was a tough matchup going against the Bucs, and he still put up 28 points last week. I think the way that they utilize him, the way that he's going to use his legs to gain rushing yards is going to give him a consistent floor week to week. Going against the Giants this week, I think it is a great matchup where I don't know if he can put up 28 points because they said that they're trying to minimize his rushing attempts and probably get some of the wide receivers more involved. But I think that this is a great matchup for him, and he's my start of the week. For my sit, I'm going with Joe Burrow going against Kansas City. Kansas City, as we know, has a great defense. I think that they are going to scheme up to kind of stop him. And without T. Higgins, Jamar Chase still kind of coming up to speed. And I don't know if Joe Burrow is clearly healthy. Like, I didn't see it last week. I thought that, going against New England, they would have some success. I know New England has a solid defense, but I just can't trust Joe Burrow right now. I actually had him in a league where I had Anthony Richardson just kind of as a backup quarterback, and I dropped Joe Burrow because I just don't like what I see.
No, I think those are fair, and I don't disagree with your starts and stits. I mean, I think Jaden Daniels is an easy start until he plays that elite defense, just on the rushing ability alone. Um, and then I agree on the Joe Burrow. Is this? I think Cincinnati seems like it's on a downward slope. I drafted Jamar Chase with one of my first round picks in my redraft league. I'm hoping it works out, but I'm not too sure. And going to Kansas City, and playing against Patrick Mahomes, somebody you beat before, but somebody you also lost to. Um, I think considering his week one performance, I think you gotta sit him because there's too many better options right now on your waiver wire that you can maybe just wait it on Joe. I don't think Joe's gonna suck forever. It's just there's probably better fantasy starts even on your waiver wire than Joe Burrow right now. So I do agree with those. So my start is Caleb Williams versus Houston. I, I know that's a bold take, but look, man, it's gonna be a shootout. You're playing against CJ Stroud. Caleb Williams is going to come in there and he knows he stunk it up week one. And you're going to have to match CJ Stroud's production or you're going to lose the game. It's simple as that. Um, Anthony Richardson, he only had 19 attempts passing the ball. So I don't know. This is going to be the first game all year Houston's going to come in and they're going to play a quarterback who's throwing it 30 times this game, maybe even more if it's a shootout. So I'm interested to see how Houston defense holds up against that. I know they got a good defense. I know they got a good secondary with Stingley and others. But I think this is going to be a coming out game for Caleb Williams. First overall pick. You got the weapons. Um, that I'm starting Caleb Williams. Not starting him over Jaden though, but he's and I didn't want to pick Jaden Daniels because I would pick him last week, Jaden. I just feel like that's redundant. So that's why I went with Caleb Williams. So I know he played against Tennessee week one. He'll get out of his jitters. I think this will be his coming out party. My sit, my sit. Now Hill might want to close his ears right now. I'm sitting Dak Prescott. You're playing against the Saints, man. You seen what they did to my boy Bryce Young, and I know the Panthers they suck. Um, and I know Dallas kind of got a big lead on Cleveland, so they didn't have to utilize Dak in that passing game as much. But I think that's going to be a disadvantage. They didn't get that practice in for the Saints, and the Saints clearly have one of the best secondaries in the league. Um, I think it's going to be a defensive battle. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. Um, so I'm sitting Dak. He only had 11 points against Cleveland. Cleveland's still a good defense. I think Dallas scored what on a special teams touchdown with Turpin, didn't they? Or they almost scored. So their offense didn't really produce at full level. So this is going to be the first real matchup they have, and I just think Dak Prescott is going to have a slow game. I just think I'm sitting Dak Prescott. So
we got a question that says, "Who's your backup quarterback if you're sitting Dak?"
Backup quarterback.
Who are you turning to this week if you're sitting Dak?
So Baker Mayfield, he's on a lot of waiver wires.
I agree.
I would say Derek Carr, but he's playing against Dallas. That's not a good start. But Baker Mayfield definitely is a guy you would pick up to start over Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott. And that's who I was talking about when I was talking about Joe Burrow. I would start Baker. And Baker seems like he might be one of the top quarterbacks in fantasy this year. He was top 10 last year. So he might improve to top 6, top 5, knows. the offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, seems like a great fit for Baker as well. So we'll
I'm
see
not
what
sitting
happens
Dak.
there.
I'm not sitting Dak this week. Dallas is at home. Like Dallas plays really well at home. I know it's the Saints. I think the Saints did extremely well against a bad quarterback at home in the dome. Going on the road to Dallas is a completely different situation. And Dallas's offense is pretty good. So I think Dak is going to have a great game going against the Saints. I know it's a homer pick for you, but also with Caleb, Houston is. I think Houston's defense is much more improved than we think. You're down on them because they went against Anthony Richardson, and Anthony Richardson played a pretty good game last week. He had a couple of bombs that he threw and a couple that he actually missed, but I think Houston's defense is actually pretty solid. So I don't expect Caleb Williams to do well this week.
We'll see what happens. Let's move on to running backs. Um, who's your starting sit for running backs?
So I'm conflicted on running backs this week. My start is kind of somebody that you can probably get on the wire right now. It's Alexander Madison.
Yep.
Um, I like the matchup going against Baltimore. If you need somebody, Zamir White looked pretty bad last week. I think he had a fumble and just could not get anything going on the ground. Alexander Madison is obviously going to be involved in the pass game. They're going against Baltimore. Baltimore is a really good defense, and I think you're going to see Vegas probably be behind and probably throwing the ball more. So you're going to see Alexander Madison on the field. I'm expecting at least double digits, 10 plus points if you need kind of a spot start for a running back. Like maybe you had A Chain is out, or somebody else is out this week. My sit for this week is actually, man, I had two, but one was going to be Josh Jacobs. I don't like Josh Jacobs this week, but my other one is actually David Montgomery. Going against Tampa Bay, I don't think you're going to see the same numbers that he put up last week against the Rams. I see this as a big Jahmyr Gibbs game, being involved in the pass game. So I think David Montgomery is probably a sit for me this week.
So those are fair starts and sits. I have no disagreements with that. Uh, I do think Alexander Madison will continue to have a role in that rushing offense. This is because they literally have nobody. I did draft a Samir White in one of my leagues just to give him a shot. It wasn't a high round. It was a little lower. Uh, you just never know. But I just don't think he's gonna produce. So somebody's got to produce for the Raiders, even with, especially when they don't have no great quarterback play. So they're going to have to rely on rushing the ball. So I do think Alexander Madison is a good start. My start to sit is Tony Pollard. I'm starting Tony Pollard. I drafted Tony Pollard pretty late, and I thought it was a good value. A lot of people think Tajay Spears was going to, split a lot of carries, and maybe he eventually will. But they're just going to ride the hot hand. And as long as Tony Pollard is hot, he plays against the Jets. You seen what Jordan Mason did. If Jordan Mason can do it, I know Tony Pollard can do it. After coming off a 16 rushes for 82 yards, I think Tony Pollard can have another similar game against the Jets. You throw in a touchdown, and you got another great start. 2 back-to-back weeks for Tony Pollard. My sit at running back is Aaron Jones. You're going against the 49ers. I know it's at home. Sam Darnold's not going to look as good like he did against the Giants. So they're going to be leaning on Aaron Jones. Breece Hall did have a touchdown against the 49ers, but he only had 16 rushes for 54 yards, 3.38 yards per carry, and that's considered the best projected running back, or at least top 5 in this year that a lot of people drafted high in Breece Hall. So I don't think he's got to be 30 years old now. Aaron Jones. I don't think he's going to do any better than what Breece Hall did last week against the 49ers. So you're sitting Aaron Jones.
Yep, I agree with both. 49ers were hitting last on Monday night, and like I don't want to start Aaron Jones. I didn't pick Aaron Jones up in any of my leagues just because of age and injury. So yeah, I agree with you. Wide receiver, my start and sit for this week. I am starting Tyler Johnson. Um, I like the matchup going against Arizona, and I like what I saw. I think when you're looking at wide receivers to start, you're looking at the offense. Sean McVay always kind of schemes up people that he puts in, and as you saw, Tyler Johnson just kind of slid right into the Puka Nacua role. Picked up, I think, 5 receptions for 79 yards, 77
Yep.
yards. I mean, it was like they didn't lose any steam, with Puka Nacua going out. And I hate to say that because I'm a big Puka Nacua believer, but I think you're going to see Arizona try to take away Cooper Kupp, and that's just going to open up the offensive game for Tyler Johnson and Demarcus Robinson. So if you're looking for a start or a flex, I think Tyler Johnson is that person that you can put in. And then for my sit is Stephon Diggs going against Chicago. I think Chicago's defense can be a top 5 defense this season. The cornerbacks are obviously great. I believe Jalen Johnson is probably a top 5 cornerback, or will be this season. I say Stephon Diggs is probably going to be taken out of the game at some point. Nico is going to get his targets. I think that this is the Tank Dell week where Tank Dell kind of gets his yardage. He had 8 targets last week, which matched Stephon Diggs and I think Nico last week. So everybody kind of got an equal share. I think this is the week where you see Tank Dell get into the end zone because I believe that the coverage is going to be on Stephon.
Yeah, a guy that, and I like Tyler Johnson, I really do. Even when he was with Tampa Bay, I was hoping it worked out in Tampa Bay because I had him in a very deep dynasty league, and I had him on my taxi squad when he was a rookie because I think he was like a 3rd, 4th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. But a guy that's on the Rams who is more on the bottom of the depth chart, but you might want to stash in deeper leagues if Puka Nacua continues to miss some time, and that's Jordan Whittington. I think if Puka continues to miss time and you get more inconsistent play from Tyler Johnson and Demarcus Robinson, you will see Jordan Whittington at some part in this season, and he had a phenomenal camp from what I read, and I think you need to stash him in deeper leagues.
Yeah, I can see that probably later in the season if Puka does miss time and they're going to bring him on slowly. I think for this week, Tyler is probably going to be that guy, though.
For sure. And I got Jordan Whittington on my taxi squads on 2 of my dynasty leagues. So that's just how I feel about him. Some of the same stuff you read on Jordan Whittington is the same, almost the same type of stuff you read about Puka last year. So that's why I was kind of high on him. I knew he wasn't going to bust out the scene like Puka did. I knew it may take some time. But I also seen the Puka injuries start to come just because he was played so much last year. He did a lot last year. You knew that was going to carry over. It's kind of like how Cooper Kupp was last year. He had a phenomenal season the year before, and you could tell that kind of warned him the next season. A lot of snap count, a lot of targets went his way. So
one thing I want to say is there are certain coaches that that the players are going to get burnt out, and it's going to start being taxing on them. Sean McVay is one of them because when he finds a player that he likes, he's going to utilize them throughout the whole season. You saw that with Puka last season. You saw it with Cooper Kupp the season before. The other one is Kyle Shanahan. When he gets attached to a player, he's gonna tax him and he's gonna burn him out. Christian McCaffrey, overutilized. You see what's happening now. Debo last season. Debo got injured in the middle of last season. So it's certain coaches that you see that you kind of, once that player has a really good year and they're utilized heavily, the next year you might want to kind of shy away from that player. Puka was that guy this year.
for sure. And then my starting sit at wide receiver, I got Mike Evans starting against Detroit. Um, you know, he's kind of flown under the radar this year. I feel like not a lot of people took him high like in his younger years, but he's still producing like he's always, because he kind of produces the same numbers every year. He stays the
Yep.
same. He never goes up. He never goes down. He just stays the same. And I just know you're going to get that consistent level from Mike Evans, especially knowing that Cooper Kupp was able to have a good game at his age. 21 targets against Detroit. So if he's getting that target share against Detroit and had 110 yards, if the Buccaneers have to get in a shootout with the Lions, you know Mike Evans is going to get them targets, and you know he's going to be able to produce against that secondary. He's going to at least get one touchdown. I know that for sure. So I'm starting Mike Evans for sure. My sit is Devontae Adams at Baltimore. I know Rashid Rice had a good game against Baltimore, but that's week one against the defending champs. You're playing against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, come on. So you're going at Baltimore. You're on a crappy or a shitty team, in the Raiders. So you're sitting Devontae, and honestly, Devontae's fantasy relevance is like, what is he anymore? I think you're starting to see kind of a disappearance from Devontae Adams.
Yep. I like both of those. Devontae, I really wasn't that high on this season, just because age and his quarterback is Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. For tight end, let's go with for my sit. Oh man, this is tough. I'm going with George Kittle as my sit for this week. I don't like what I'm seeing out of Kittle. I didn't really like what I was seeing out of Kittle last season, and I don't really like what I saw last week going against the Jets. Minnesota, like we said, Brian Flores schemes up his defense, and I don't think that what they did against the Giants was a fluke because it was the Giants. I think you're going to see a really scrappy, tough defense, and I don't see George Kittle probably getting a lot of yardage and catches this week. So I'm sitting George Kittle. And for my start, you set Devontae Adams. I'm starting Brock Bowers. I think going against Baltimore, this is going to be a game in the second half where they're going to be trailing, they're going to be throwing, and I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for Brock Bowers. We saw him get a good amount of work last week. I know he's dealing with a foot injury. He had 6 receptions for 58 yards on 8 targets. That's great for a tight end. So give me Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I actually got Brock in one of my leagues. I actually targeted him, and my whole draft strategy this year was to go young. Rookies, high profile rookies, maybe them second, third year players that are on the rise, and that was my goal as far as draft strategy. So I do agree with Brock. I don't know about George Kittle. We'll see. If Brandon Ayuk continues to struggle, Brock Party is going to have to find somebody to throw to besides Debo. Because, like I said about Jordan Mason earlier, they're not going to be able to lean on him when teams start to scheme up against the run. So they're going to put it on Brock, and he's going to have to throw to somebody. And, I don't know about George Kittle. I got George Kittle in my other league, and I'm starting George Kittle. So I
If
know
you have him,
Minnesota's a good defense,
if you
and I
have
know
him,
they,
you have to start him.
What'd you say?
I said if you have him, you have to start him.
You got to start him.
Yeah, I don't really like him, and I don't like the matchup. That's the only reason I'm sitting him this week.
And I feel that. So I'm gonna start with my sit like you did, and I'm setting Dalton Schultz. He says I think I would sit Brock and start Kittle. I don't know if I had to choose to start Brock or Kittle between the two, I'm starting Brock.
That's tough. I think I would start Brock, but like I said, I don't like that matchup this week.
Yeah. And the 49ers are a better team than Minnesota, but it's the vice versa with the Raiders and Ravens. The Ravens are a better team than the Raiders.
Yeah.
But I like the upside of Brock. I think he's going to continue to rise, and you might see a Sam Laporta like season. And I know maybe AJ will call me out here because I was against tight ends drafting him in the first round. Now I'm supporting them, so I'm like flip flopping here. But I got you because I drafted Brock Powers in fantasy now. Um, so I'm sitting Dalton Schultz this week versus Chicago. I know Tennessee's tight end got a touchdown. I can't pronounce his name. It's a hard name to pronounce. You know what I'm talking about?
Who?
Tennessee's tight end starts with an
Yeah,
O.
Chisel Okonkwo.
Yeah, he got a touchdown, but I believe he didn't do much outside of that touchdown last week against Chicago. Um, So I'm sitting Dalton Schultz. He's a little banged up. I think he's questionable. I think you're just going to see a whole bunch of targets going to Diggs, Collins, Tank Dell. I think just not going to be enough going around. I'm starting Hayden Hurst against Carolina this week. You've seen the Saints use two different tight ends, and they both were, top 5,
Yeah.
right? Jawan Johnson and Foster Moreau, two guys you would never think of, especially last year. So maybe Jawan, but not Foster Moreau, So if those two guys can do it, I know Hayden Hurst can do it against his former team in the Carolina Panthers. I believe it's at Los Angeles, isn't it?
No, it's at Carolina.
Well, I don't think that makes a difference. But I'm starting Hayden Hurst. Uh, I'm thinking maybe 10 to 12 points would get you a solid fantasy output at the tight end position.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about Hayden Hurst as a start, but I mean, going against Carolina, the passing game is going to be there. And do any of the Chargers wide receivers interest you season long?
Well, let's take a look. Let's see. So the only one that interests me the most is obviously Ladd
Yeah.
McConnell. It seems like he's got the most upside. It's not letting me pull up the Chargers wide receivers. Hold up. There we go.
McConkey and then Palmer, but that's really about it.
Yeah, Quentin Johnson seems to be like a bust. The more you see him play, so you got to go McConkey, and that's another reason why you would start Hayden Hurst. You know what I'm saying? And Brandon Rice didn't even play. It looks like their other rookie wide receiver. So you got to go McConkey.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I agree with you.
there's no way you're going with anybody else in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, Sean said
Who's you got a defense?
Chargers. That's the one I'm going with.
Yeah.
Chargers.
Well, I got the 49ers. I think that's an easy start,
That's the easiest.
obviously. And you're sitting Philly. That's a easy sit.
I'm not sitting Philly.
You're not sitting Philly. I think
No.
Atlanta might turn it around week 2. I think you might see Kirk Cousins actually passing the ball to Kyle Pitts. But
I'm not sitting Philly. I think Philly at home, and the way that the Falcons looked last week, I would start Philly. I'm definitely starting the Chargers. Washington, I think, is a sneaky start for this week as well, even though their defense is terrible. I would probably be sitting Dallas's defense this week. And then Green Bay's defense as well.
Let's see. What about New England?
I actually had New England as a sneaky start. I picked them up in one of my leagues because I couldn't get the Chargers, so I picked New England up. Their defense, like you would expect them to be bad because of what they did in the offseason, but their defense actually looked really good against Cincinnati. And I don't know if that has more to do with Cincinnati or if it has more to do with New England's offense. But Gerard Mayo is a good defensive coordinator, and he's leading that team now. So you would expect the defense to be pretty solid.
They are playing against Seattle, but at least it's at home.
Yep. And
So
Kenneth Walker is banged up as well.
they still got Shaq Charbonnet and they got Kenny McIntosh. So they still got some options. Geno Smith looked nice. He had a run for a touchdown. So that's going to be an interesting game. But I think New England defense is a good start for the rest of the year. I drafted the Bears and Raiders in half and half in my leagues. I might start thinking about dropping the Raiders just because I just don't see their team being any good. I thought their defense would at least be good just because they got Christian Watkins now. You still got Max Crosby, so I thought they'd make improvement. But honestly, I like the Saints and Dallas defense too. I mean, I think that's going to be a defensive battle for sure. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. So both of
Yep.
them defenses are good starts, in my opinion. And
Yep.
I got a kicker, Blake Groupie. He had over 20 points, man. He got me a dub this week.
That was going against the Panthers, though.
Sure, but still.
Let's just say this for the rest of the season. If you have any players that are going against the Panthers, just start them. If it's a kicker, you start them. If it's a defense, you start them. If it's the quarterback, you start them. Just start everybody against the Panthers.
Look, man, I'm telling you, the Panthers are going to turn it around. They're not going to be the laughing stock. I'm telling you. They might go 0-4, 0-5, but eventually they're going to turn around. I don't see Bryce Young being as bad like he was last year. Sure, week 1 was horrible, but it's just I believe in Frank Canals'. You see what he did with the last 2 quarterbacks he's been. Baker Mayfield top 10, Geno Smith top 5 in fantasy. So I mean, something's got to give. Their O-line is better. The offensive line was not a problem against the Saints. It was generally no wide receivers was open, and there was no running game. I just feel like they're going to have to find a running game first, and then it goes to passing.
I do think that Deontay Johnson is going to bounce back. But I think, Sean, you're crazy, and anybody that is going against the Panthers, you start. I don't want anybody who is watching this, if you have somebody who's going against the Panthers, if you have Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston and Hayden, you just said Hayden Hurst was a start. So everybody going against the Panthers is a start.
Yeah, you got a point. If I'm saying Hayden Hurst, a former Panther, is going to be the start of the week, you might have a point.
Right, exactly. And I think we can sign off with that. Start everybody against the Panthers. There's
For
no
now.
sign of fantasy. Sean, I'll see you next week for week 2, and we'll be back. We'll be back next Wednesday.
Yes, sir. There's no crying in fantasy.
There's no crying in fantasy.